My name is Michelle Cooper Iverson, and we're celebrating in this plenary what is really the start of our 40-year anniversary celebration. And I've been with CHF BC for almost 15 years now. So I'm really excited to be in this place where when I started, we were celebrating our 25th. So it's really a great milestone for CHF BC. Currently, I am the Chief Operating Officer for the CHF BC Group. And we're doing something different today because we have people here in person and we have people online. So we have a team of staff around the room that's going to support us. So Liz and Janice are here and they'll have microphones. So if there's some feedback or questions from the people in the room, they can speak into the microphone so that everybody that's online can hear as well. And Ed, who is over, I don't know if the camera is going to see him, but anyway, so Ed is going to be our online engagement specialist. So he's really going to read those questions and comments from the people that are online and share it into the room. Our goal is to try and make this as inclusive as possible, regardless of where you are, how you're participating. So that's it. We can get started. Okay, so let's go back in time. July 27th, 1982, we incorporated as the Community Cooperative Housing Federation. That's right. Little known fact, I don't know if you guys knew that, but we didn't initially incorporate as the name that we bear today, which is the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC. In fact, we changed our name 2 years later in 1984. But in preparation for today's session, I took a look at the original Memorandum of Association, which is that visionary document of what the initial incorporators were hoping to or aspiring to achieve. And I'm just going to abbreviate it, so I'm not going to read the document, but I think you'll find it very intriguing, as I did. So they wanted to act as a spokesperson for housing co-ops, check. Share skills and information among members and other associations, check. Promote the planning and building of housing co-op communities, check. Raise and maintain funds to attain the objects of the co-op. I won't say check anymore. Establish and carry out an education program. Support and participate in the larger co-op sector. And maintain and expand co-op housing. That's a lot of checks, guys. So this was written in 1982, 40 years ago. And can you imagine the foresight of that small group of incorporating members? I think it's remarkable. So how did we get from that aspirational place to the complex organization that we are today? And if you look at us collectively, we are CHF BC, we are COHO as a property management company and the Community Land Trust. So that's 15,000 co-op homes, a property management company that provides services for 40% of those homes, a social purpose real estate developer with a portfolio of over 2,700 homes, either occupied, under development, or under construction. In addition to that, CHF BC owns a 20% equity stake in Cassia Financial, which is a social purpose investment fund manager with a commitment to responsible investing. So how did we get from there to here? Well, we could fill this room with people, some of them I'm staring at today, and I know there's more online, that have contributed to the success of CHF BC over the years, as today's panelists will tell you. If you think of them as the storytellers, they're here to help us capture some of those key moments that will speak to the essence of where we began, how we evolved, where we are today, and I think also important, very important, where we're going. So let's meet them. I don't think that any of them are any strangers to anyone here, so it will be a very brief introduction. And for those of you that haven't met them, you will understand very shortly their impact and significance for the co-op housing sector. So I'll start with Marylee Robson. Marylee is not only a past president of CHF BC, she's actually one of the founding directors. She worked with CHF Canada in a communications and GR management role during the time when the Agency of Cooperative Housing was being created. She's now retired, which is why she looks so rested and calm, and she is a successful author. Cassia Kantrow is also a past president of CHF BC, and she is currently a current director of CHF Canada as well. And I believe you're the treasurer. It's true. That's correct, yeah. No surprise, she's a CPA, but she's dedicated her work in a professional career to working with organizations with a social purpose. And no stranger at the end is Thom Armstrong, our CEO, of CHFBC, Coho and the Community Land Trust. He's been with us since 2000, which is in BC. But before that, he had more than 30 years experience in leadership positions in Saskatchewan, Ontario. And so I don't think I've ever, I mean, I'm sure you've met them all, but we've never had them all together on the same stage. And given that history, I'm so honored to be sharing the stage with you guys, if only to invoke the conversation.
We'll see how you feel in half an hour.
Okay, so they tell me everything I say under my breath is heard. So, Merrilee, as one of the founding directors, can you set us the scene? Back in 1982 or before that, what were the members of CHFBC? What was in their mindset as they were incorporating the organization?
Okay. Well, yeah, first of all, the intention of the founding directors was always to have a co-op housing federation of BC, and the community housing federation was because when we incorporated, the province said we had to demonstrate that we had a majority of housing co-ops that belonged, and we started with a smaller group. So our goal was always to be a BC federation. And I think to set the stage, and I was thinking back about the starting of the organization, understanding how different it was and how we would never have imagined that we would be able to have a meeting where people are not just in a room, but around the province talking electronically, because 40 years ago, we communicated through Canada Post and long distance telephone, and that was it. And so that's pretty amazing. And that was the situation we were in when I first started, when we moved into our housing co-op, and I was the brand new president of a brand new housing co-op, and we were pretty much on our own. So I did go the first year, I went to the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada annual meeting, which was in Ottawa that year. And I had an opportunity to spend all my time going around talking to people and saying, if you find yourself in this situation, what do you do? And if this happens, what do you do? And then I went back home, and there was none of that. There was kind of a list in Ottawa of housing co-ops, but I didn't really have access to it. I knew that there were other housing co-ops nearby, but I didn't know who the people were involved, so I couldn't call them up, I couldn't contact them. And then the following year, there was the CHF Canada annual meeting was in Vancouver, and a group of us were working on the local organizing. And we found it was so amazing to be able to meet regularly with other people from other housing co-ops. And so once that AGM was over, we wanted to keep it going. And that was the impetus for a group of founding members, volunteers, to start meeting and talking about the idea of forming a federation. And I think one of the really impressive things was we contacted all of the co-ops in BC and asked if they were interested. And then as a show of interest, we asked them to pay dues to an organization that didn't yet exist. And they did. So I think it shows also that we were pretty enthusiastic and persuasive, but how desperate the need was for housing co-ops to have an organization like this. And so the three things, the major focus that we wanted was to have advocacy for co-op housing, to have an education program, and to provide the services that housing co-ops needed. And as Michelle said, check.
Absolutely, check. If I were to go to our CEO, Thom, based on those initial concepts that Merrilee describes, I think what are some of important takeaways towards the federation that we are today?
Well, first I'll say, how amazing is it that the founding group could sit around a table and set out a vision for an association that still resonates 40 years later. I mean, many of the members that we serve today weren't even born when that group, set those objectives. So that is just an incredible legacy to have created. But the story, it's just a classic co-op story, right? A group of people with a need, and they organize to meet those needs cooperatively. And the takeaway for me, based on the inspiration from that founding group, is really simple. And that's in a membership association, it's always and forever about the members, right? I mean, we're not government. We're not a regulator. We don't accept any government funding. That was a principle laid down by that founding group because they wanted to be accountable to their members, not to the government. And, here we are today. And I think if you ever forget that, if you're running a membership association and you ever forget that it's always and forever about the members, then your slide into irrelevancy is going to be quick and brutal. and that's for me the takeaway.
That's great. Thanks. And over to Cassia. Let's talk about the significance of the fact that when we created a federation for BC, it wasn't in isolation. We had support from the national body as well.
Well, I understand from talking to Marylee that there was a grant involved. So that's fantastic. And that's really important. I can probably speak more to what the relationship is today because
Absolutely.
In 1982, I was 10.
Okay.
So I believe my mother was involved early on, but I was not. I was busy with other things.
Yeah.
So today we have a crossover in our governance where we have directors at CHF BC and at CHF Canada, and incredible communication. We've just really worked together. So I know that the CEOs are in contact, and there is sometimes I hear Thom's voice come through Tim's voice a little bit. I say, "Oh, that's Thom."
Sorry.
No, it's good. And certainly we've worked very hard at CHF BC to take the great ideas that have happened at CHF BC, particularly around growth and development, and try and influence the national stage. So really, how can we work nationally to recreate some of the successes that we've had in the community land trust?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, it's about 2007. The Leaky Housing Co-op campaign was in full gear. Since I've been here as well, the You Hold the Key campaign as well. I mean, I think I don't know if either of you want to sort of fill in the grid for anybody that may not know what those were about, but those were good demonstrations of the provincial and the national association working together.
So I can't speak so much to the Leaky Co-op because that was a bit before my time. I was busy with a small child. But the You Hold the Key campaign, which was in full swing when I joined the board at CHF BC, really was about fixing the issue of the expiring subsidies. As the mortgages were paid off, subsidies were disappearing. And there was a real concern about being able to maintain our mixed income model and making sure that low-income families and individuals were supported in our co-ops. And that was ultimately a successful campaign. There's still work to be done because the FCHI2 subsidy program ends far too soon. So I know that You Hold the Key campaign is going to ramp up in a different way, I'm pretty sure.
It's a pretty classic. I mean, the Leaky Co-op era was a classic example of how important that partnership is to us. I mean, that's 75 co-ops, a minimum of 75 co-ops in BC, afflicted with catastrophic building envelope failure that required millions of dollars to fix. The problem was only in BC, I mean, at that time. But the solution was with the federal government because every one of those co-ops was funded under a federal co-op housing program. So without a voice and a partner in Ottawa to speak to that issue, I don't think we ever would have found the solution that we did. And it taught us the strength in that partnership. And the relationship hasn't always been a smooth track. I mean, it took us a while to figure out that we were going to be much more effective, each of us, by staying in our lane and not allowing, overlap and duplication to cloud the issue. And now that's very clear. And the relationship has never been stronger. And whenever the problem or the solution is to be found in Ottawa or the federal government, we rely on that, on the strength of that partnership to deliver for us. We'd be we'd much weaker without it.
Those lanes work in tandem.
Yeah.
That's right. To fast forward to some more recent projects that we've worked on together, can you talk about Cassia? Because that's a partnership that involves not just CHF BC, but also CHF Canada.
It does. I mean, originally Cassia was a creature of the Housing Services Corporation in Ontario, meant to serve the mandate that the government of Ontario gave to nonprofit and co-op providers to invest their capital reserves. But, they could see the viability of that company on a downward track as reserves were spent on capital renewals. So they had to expand the ownership and the client base of the company. And CHF Canada, CHF BC, and the BC Nonprofit Housing Association became equity investors in the company. And our equity stake in that company has more than doubled in value in the few years since we made the investment. And it's delivering very sound investment management services to co-ops for those long-term reserves. So again, that wouldn't exist without that partnership. Together, we own 40% of the company, and it's a going concern.
Thanks. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit to our group buying programs. Before I ask Marylee to talk about that program and what was the original thoughts of the founding group or the early members maybe, I just want to put out a question to the audience with our audience engagement specialists, is if you can name 3 of CHFBC's group buying programs or partners or any ones that you're using at your co-op. We'll come back to it a little bit while you think about it, but let's go to Merrilee. So member economic participation, which is a definite indicator of members using the Federation. And today, CHFBC has a robust group buying program. The revenue from our group buying program exceeds our membership dues by a significant amount. And that's really a program that provides services for members for the services they need to operate their buildings. So what was the initial plan when that might have started?
Well, as I said earlier, one of the things that members wanted when the Federation first started was services for co-ops. And that came in different forms. The first one that we did was COHO, setting up a management company. And at the time, there were a few individual staff who worked independently for housing co-ops. But by and large, most of the co-ops, if they had management and weren't entirely volunteer run, were managed by companies that by and large formed managed condo developments or private rental buildings. So that really didn't work with the co-op model, and people would, go and talk to their staff, and the staff in those companies did not understand that the people that lived in the building actually owned it. And so the goal of setting up COHO, I think, was really important to have a service that worked for the members. And then there was also the CHIP program, which was pooling investment, and benefited everyone, benefited the individual housing co-ops, benefited the credit unions that participated, and benefited the Federation for the income. And then, so I think the group buying was a natural extension from that. And I wasn't directly involved in some of the setup of that, but it makes so much more sense for people to have a central organization that goes out and gets quotes and finds out whether something's reliable than for me as an individual co-op member to go, okay, well, we need to buy 40 fridges. How do we do that? And where do we start? So I think the takeaway is things work so much better when you do it together and when you don't try and do everything from scratch by yourself. And that's the benefit of having the Federation.
Thanks, Marylee. Ed, and anybody in the room that wants to share the group buying programs that they're currently using, or anybody online, Ed, that has responded?
Yeah, we have some good answers. So Trail Appliances, TELUS, Waste Management as a program, cabinets, flooring.
Excellent. Great. Anybody in the room want to share? They're all shaking their heads for those people online. So I think that's 100% agreement. That's great. So Thom, I'm just going to go to you because Marylee has described some of the early goals. What is the relevance of the group buying program today, and some other things that might be important?
Well, I mean, that's another great example of that founding group, like latching onto an idea that was going to deliver value to members for literally generations, right? I mean, it's And today it's still an important reflection of what I said earlier, that it's always and only about the members. I mean, we're not, you might notice we don't sponsor, what I would call any affinity programs. I don't like affinity programs because it just turns you into the shopping channel, right? You negotiate a discount with suppliers and then you just turn everyone loose on them. That's not group buying. Group buying is negotiating an arrangement with a supplier that's based on price, service, and advocacy if things go sideways. And that's a relationship that not only generates revenue for the Federation, but adds enormous value to members and creates the conditions for self-sufficiency. So, budgets get tighter. We want to prevent money from leaking out of the system and put it to use to the benefit of members. And, we're going to have to keep our eye on what is going to add value for members in the future. And it's just a very dynamic set of programs that responds to member needs. And those seeds were planted in 1981, 1982 by a group that had tremendous foresight.
Thanks. And our group buying programs are very active, not only with the direct service to members, but to the Federation. They support the sponsorship, the scholarship program.
Mm-hmm.
They sponsor events like that to reduce the costs for the Federation as well. So it definitely allows us to scale in a different capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to look at governance now. We started with a small group, and now we've evolved to multi-level, multi-societies, and some of that growth was during your time on the board at CHF BC, Cassia. So did you want to talk about what the conversation might have been around the board table at that time?
Sure. So when I joined the board, the land trust had just started to be active. We were in the process of development for Fraser View. And because I think I was at the groundbreaking for that one. So we hadn't even started construction. And what I saw was this sort of landscape of potential growth and an organization that was not quite ready because it had happened so quickly. And the focus goes into dealing with what's immediately at hand. So at the board table, we just couldn't believe how many meetings we had to go to, for one thing. Everybody who was on that board was also the member of the associated societies and then had to form the boards of each of those. So it was just board meeting after board meeting. I also saw management preparing for all these board meetings, which seemed like maybe not the best use of everybody's time during a period of growth. So it took some debate at our board table, but we did manage to find a solution that I think that management is happy with and the board is happy with. And it brought all of those boards into one board. So the CHF BC board is the board of the land trusts. It is the board of COHO, and all the business happens at the same table. And that alignment was also a foundation for the continued growth of the group of organizations, which is crucial. That sets the foundation for future successes.
Great, that's awesome. Thanks. So in our co-op world, the first thing I learned when I start there's a lot of acronyms. So I'm going to put something out there to the audience and hopefully online. If you know what the acronym, actually our co-op acronyms are so sophisticated, we've made them words. So VISHA is an acronym that is now a word. If there's anybody out there in either here or in person that knows what VISHA stands for, I can't move on until somebody answers that question. So because I'm going to give away the answer. Okay. So Liz, if you would just let Pat.
Vancouver Island Co-op Housing Association.
Thank you. That is right. Vancouver Island Co-op Housing Association is the VISHA. So over to you, Thom. 100% of Vancouver Island members are members of the Federation, but that wasn't always the case. And it's not only our 40th anniversary for CHFBC, it's the 20th anniversary of the VISHA merger with CHFBC. So tell us that story.
Well, in 1982, it was one province-wide federation. In fact, we were trying to figure out the other day exactly when the Vancouver Island co-ops hived off into a separate federation on the island. And it must have been around 84, 85, somewhere in there.
It was when my mother was on the board.
Oh, so it was her fault.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So we'll blame Jill. But whatever happened, it's the island thing. So they hived off into a separate federation, and we're actively engaged in not only services on the island, but in the broader sector. But by 2000, that lack of scale was catching up to them in a big way. I mean, there are only 34 co-ops on the island, fewer than 1,200 co-op homes, about 10 to 15 units smaller on average per co-op than co-ops on the mainland. And mainland co-ops are small relative to the national average. So, the conversation began in 2001. It pretty much consumed all of 2001. What would be involved in knitting the two federations together? And you can imagine the conversations, they all centered around governance, services, and finances, right? Who's going to get to decide what services will be available and who's going to pay for it? And it was a very engaged discussion throughout the year, but the test for me, or at least the measure of success, was that when it came time for the two federations to pass the special resolutions to create the merger, they both passed unanimously at annual meetings of VISHA and CHF BC. So on January 1, 2002, we became one province-wide federation again, and that was 20 years ago. So we have not only a 40th anniversary, but a 20th anniversary to celebrate this year. And it's the evidence of success, as Michelle mentioned, is that the member affiliation rate on the island is 100%. And we never take that for granted. And we want to earn that loyalty again every year. That's the beauty of a membership association. Members vote essentially with their wallets every year to reinvest in their membership association. And we're really proud of our record on the island.
Everyone's cheering we're doing a golf clap in the room, but that's very exciting. So we talked about cooperation among cooperatives, Principle 6, with the National Federation with the Vancouver Island. But what has evolved in the 40 years is that cooperation among cooperatives expands beyond cooperatives, and it expands to organizations that are sharing our values and our purpose. And a lot of that is created with the Housing Central Partnership, which Cassia, at the time, you was also around your tenure as a CHF BC director. So first we'll start with you about from a governance point of view, how that evolved, and then we'll go to Thom to talk about some of the projects or how it started and what are some of the initiatives that Housing Central is doing. So let's start with the governance piece with Cassia.
Sure. When I first joined the board and we had our first strategic planning session, one of the things that we identified as really, really important for CHFBC is the agility of the organization. And I think that forming of Housing Central is another example of that agility. When the opportunities arose, we wanted to be able to meet them and we wanted to maintain that agility in the organization. And I think that you guys have. I don't remember the year because it all blends at this point, but really, I think that management gets the credit for planting the seeds for Housing Central. It was Thom and Keyshawn Roy who sat down together and had some conversations about what the alignments were and brought those alignments back to the board and proposed this co-location, broader conference, and really it's an alliance that is, I think, most valuable in its influence on government. And it was just a brilliant move.
Talk about the brilliance.
Yeah, well, don't remember that part, but so I'd like to talk about vertical and horizontal partnerships. And if, to be maybe a bit critical of ourselves, if the co-op housing sector has had a weakness over the years, it's been its affection for operating in a silo, as if there could not possibly be a benefit to broadening our horizons and creating alliances across the different housing sectors in the broader community housing ecosystem. And the vertical partnerships are easy. That's CHFBC, CHF Canada, the National Cooperative Housing Movement, but horizontally across housing sectors, working with the BC Nonprofit Housing Association and the Aboriginal Housing Management Association to create one unified voice for the community housing sector more broadly, I think has brought so much value and strength to our activities. And people were, at the very beginning, people were very skeptical when we first started, getting the word out around Housing Central. I mean, it was first really just an office location, a co-location, and an opportunity to save a bit of money on IT infrastructure and services and that kind of thing. But it became that strategic alliance. And many of our members were skeptical. We got a lot of questions about whether or not we were, whether we would threaten the co-op identity, whether it would get drowned or absorbed in that bigger nonprofit sector, because there are only 15,000 co-op homes in the province and 65,000 nonprofit homes. So it was, managed. If it wasn't managed properly, we could have been drowned out, but we're not. We're a voice at the table along with nonprofits and Indigenous housing providers, and government, media, the public. They find it so powerful to be able to ask one question. What does the community housing sector think about this? In I think 10 days, I'm going to be sitting down with the CEOs of BC Nonprofit and AMA, and meeting simultaneously with the provincial finance minister and housing minister, right? That would not likely have happened had it been a CHF BC initiative, but as a Housing Central initiative, it catches the eyes and ears of government and puts us in a position where we can have real influence. So I think it has only had an upside and not a downside.
Excellent, thank you. So we're just running out of time, which it's amazing. We could go on forever, but I'm just going to ask one final question of the panelists, and then if there's any questions online or from the people in the room, we have a few minutes for that as well. So let's start with you, Marylee. What was the most surprising and most satisfying development or evolution of CHFBC then and now?
Well, I think the most satisfying thing is just being here and seeing that the Federation is so strong and still being very innovative, and knowing that there's a room full of people and other people out there online, I think is really important. And I guess, both, I guess, satisfying and surprising. I think when we started, I said people joined an organization that didn't exist, and that was a great source of showing enthusiasm for the idea, but it wasn't always easy. There were times where we wanted to do something and it wasn't working. There were some sleepless nights and some tears, but people just persevered. Like, they went, okay, this is a great idea. It's not working now. What can we do to make it work? And I think, yes, so seeing everybody, seeing how successful and how big the organization has become is a result of the enthusiasm, support, and ability of the members to not be discouraged, to make things work. And I think that's really important too, and great for all of you to be involved.
Yes, co-op members do not get discouraged. That's been my 15-year experience. So Cassia, what would you say to CHFBC directors that are current directors on current terms? What do they need to do today or continue doing today so that we're continue to be successful another 40 years?
I think the agility that I was touched on before is really, really crucial to the organization. Maintaining that ability to respond to the opportunities that arise is really crucial. We laid that foundation. That's there. That's not going away. You can work with that to be agile and to continue to explore other opportunities. Risk management is a big deal. It's kind of boring, but it's important. And so that's going to be something that the board needs to keep an eye on. As an organization gets bigger, there is other risks that need to be reviewed, and you need to be on top of those. But really, primarily, it's that agility and staying the course. There's good work happening.
Yeah, very exciting times for sure. And Thom, why don't we just wrap up with looking at the future? What are some of the challenges and opportunities as well that are ahead? And are we ready?
Well, I'll answer the last one first. We've never been more ready. And it's inspiring, you know, to know that we're working to deliver on a mission that was created by founders 40 years ago. I don't know if they imagined at the time that we'd have a combined operating budget of $10 million, have attracted membership of 96% of the co-ops in the province and be delivering management services to 6,000 homes and adding 2,700 new homes to the sector. But that all springs from that original vision. So, you know, if you, as I said, if you always remember that it's always and only about the members, current members and future members, then I think we're ready to deliver on, we're ready to confront and overcome any challenge that we can face. You know, you can't predict the future, but we sure know from the last couple of years that life can change in ways that you just can't possibly imagine. And as long as you're building on a mission that resonates with members, you can overcome anything.
Thank you so much. And I'm gonna switch here because I do think that as a person responsible for assembling the team, that we have the team to do it in terms of the staff. We have over 135 staff across the group as well. So it's quite a robust organization, not just in terms of revenue dollars, but as an employer, CHFBC has certainly gone from small to mid-size now as well. So that is the conclusion of our panel, but we're hoping that there's some questions or comments that came in during the chat, or if there's questions from the participants in this room. We were trying to not only honor the past, but also expand your learning about some of the things that we're doing and where we're going. So we hope that we achieve that. Are there any questions from anybody here? Ed, or comments?
Oh, we have one question from the chat, one from Marylee, actually. Who are the other pioneers we should thank for 40 years of progress?
What a good question.
Good question.
Who are the other people we should be thanking?
Let's see. Well, there's so many. I think, let's see, that were people. Herb Barbalat was the founding president. David Lack, who was the president once the board was incorporated. Cassia's mother, Jill Kelly, who worked very hard on keeping the co-op finances together. Gosh, there's so many people that I could name, and sometimes, you know, people that were on the board, but sometimes just individual members who came to a meeting and came up with an idea and suggested it and pushed forward for it. So the entire co-op housing sector should be thanked for this.
Another question, do you remember some of the initial members that signed up? I think there were 20 or so. Housing co-ops, the housing co-ops.
Yeah, who were the housing co-op?
Yeah.
Alder Bay, Trafalgar, my co-op. Oh gosh.
Was Twin Rainbows there as well?
Twin Rainbows was there. There were actually False Creek, I think.
Yeah.
And then some of the co-ops further out in the valley, State Lake, I think. And
good.
Yeah.
Grandview must have been in there as well.
Grandview.
Grandview was, I think. I'm not
Quebec.
sure whether they were one of the founding members, but yeah, they were definitely
Would have been
early on. Yeah.
Great. Any questions? Any other questions or comments from the room? Okay. How are you guys feeling? Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you so much to our panelists. Have you guys ever been on the same stage together? I know that you talk to each other quite a history. Or
We've been in the same bar together, but maybe not on the same stage.
well, I did get you bar stools to so that you could.
And for the 25th anniversary, I think they made me pop out.
You
of the
did
cake.
jump out of the cake.
So
yeah,
this is much more dignified.
That was the first year I started, and that's how I first met you, Merrilee. Jumping out of the cake.
We have the pictures.
Where's my cake? Okay, thank you very much to Ms. Ballas. So
Thank you.
thanks, guys.